Africa Prime, brought to you by Jameson's Select Reserve.
History tells us that humans have lived mostly a rural lifestyle and were largely dependent on agriculture and hunting. According to the US-based Population Reference Bureau, in 1800, only 3% of the world's population lived in urban areas. By 1900, almost 14% were there. By 1950, 30% of the world's population resided in urban centers. In 2008, for the first time, the world's population was evenly split between urban and rural areas. It is expected that 70% of the world's population will be urban by 2050, and most of that growth will grow in less developed countries. Read Africa. This is Africa Prime. I'm Godfrey Motizwa. Welcome to this our discussion today, where we'll be joined by Kobe Brand. She's Regional Director for the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives, now just called Local Governments for Sustainability. And we're going to be discussing the sustainability of Africa's cities as those populations explode. We're joined by her from our Lagos studios. Kobe, good afternoon and welcome to the program.
Good afternoon. Thank you.
Kobe, I've laid out the trail of how the human race has emigrated from rural areas into the urban centers and laid out how that growth continues apace. From where you sit, let's just perhaps begin by looking at the problems that Africa's cities currently confront before we talk about the future.
Yes, absolutely. This is a topic our international organization called ICLEI deal with on a daily basis, and I think the rise of cities has never been more prominent in everybody's eyes, from the United Nations to national governments and of course to our communities and our households. We all recognize that it's at this level, at the local government level, where we have to find solutions, and that where we have to act very, very fast and rapidly with innovation and with political will and commitment to address the cumulative challenges facing us today. It is here at this level of local government where things come together in terms of the climate change, global change, but also when we talk about the recession in the economy, when we talk about the need for infrastructure and development. We realize that our cities are actually the cities of the century. We call it the century of cities in a sense because we know in 90 years from now, in one person's lifetime or life expectancy, 90% of us will be urban dwellers, forming groupings of big cities, megalopolises like Lagos, where I'm sitting today, but also smaller cities and towns. But it's here at this level where our political will needs to come together and where new ways of cooperative governance are so needed to address these issues.
Yeah, so maybe before we begin talking about the challenges, let's talk about the political will that's required to build those African cities. Do you sense from where you sit that that political will is there and indeed is actually being translated into initiatives and plans that will result in a proper urbanization trend going forward?
We have the privilege in our organization to work directly at this coalface with mayors, with commissioners, with governors, with their leadership and also their technical people in the cities. And I can tell you, yes, in Africa, in sub-Saharan Africa, where we do most of our work, the 29 countries we work in, the political will certainly is there. Local governments are ready to take on these challenges. They show innovation, they lead, and they are fantastic incubators for change in ways that national governments and the United Nations, for instance, admire and most need when it comes to implementing global deals. So yes, I think the political will at the local level is there, but our mayors and our leaders at the local level need to have clear mandates, they need to have access to resources, and there's a huge need for capacity building and skills development at that local level in order to address these cumulative challenges.
Yeah, we're going to talk about those challenges now, and of course, as you have just mentioned, they include capacity, they include a lack of skills, they talk to overpopulation, infrastructure, noise levels, pollution. Let's begin perhaps by looking at the most obvious, which is overpopulation. Do you see a strong plan from the cities that you deal with in dealing with the issue of overpopulation across African cities? I mean, I must mention the fact that it's not only Africa that is overpopulation in the cities. You see it in some of the developed cities like London, like New York, like Shanghai.
For sure. For sure. Absolutely. It's a global phenomenon. And in a way, these cities globally have more in common than one would think. Of course, individual solutions and individual answers to some of the issues that we deal with are very localized. But it's a common trend. Urbanization is a global trend. It's unstoppable. It's unbreakable. And we are saying, let's embrace it. So in terms of population growth, for 4,000 years, humankind has put itself on a pace of an unbreakable trend of urbanization. And really, we are saying let's embrace it, because this is where cities of the future are going to grow from, and this is where our leaders come from, this is where our education happens. So instead of saying let's try and stop the trend of urbanization and let's try and do something about expanding cities, yes, we are saying let's do something, but it lies in proper planning, it lies in embracing and welcoming our cities growing. It also lies in policies, like very clear policies for secondary cities and urban city regions to be formed in ways that will drive the economy, that will ensure green growth and also job creation, etc. So we see it as an endless new area of possibilities for the African continent, especially at the rate we are growing in Africa.
Yeah, but Kobe, from where you sit, do you see any cities across Africa showing that ability? You talk about the lack of capacity and the lack of skills. Do you see any city showing that they have got the skills, they've got the capacity to welcome these new immigrants and allow them to realize their dreams?
Well, this touches on the current state of infrastructure in our cities as well.
Right.
And as we all know, there are huge challenges when it comes to infrastructure. Just maintaining the current infrastructure that we have in many cities are problematic, and we experience it everywhere. It's not necessarily only in Africa that is a problem, but it's very, very much a prominent problem in our continent. But also, I think if you look at the whole issue of infrastructure, the maintenance is one side, but also then getting access to financing to expand that infrastructure in ways that are smart, in ways that are resilient to global change, and here specifically I want to mention also resilient to climate change, but will also be the infrastructure that needs to be designed into the future, and it can be of such a nature that it could actually lead to better social patterns and also stimulate the economy. So yes, there are cities that drive this innovation, and I can give you many examples.
Yes, let's name them.
We have Yes, absolutely. You know, I mean, for instance, if you look at Durban, who's going to be the host city of COP17, as we all know, the global climate negotiations taking place in Durban in December. Durban is one of these cities where the leadership is absolutely committed to integrated planning solutions, where the different sectors in a city don't work in silos, as we see so often is the case still in many of our cities. But our planning departments, our water and sanitation service departments, our infrastructure, roads, transport departments, and the electricity departments all come together with the environmental departments, etc., to find these cross-cutting solutions. So there are many examples in Durban where you have actually job creation. The green economy is actually stimulated through such plans, labor-intensive plans to actually work together across these silos. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges.
Yeah.
Other cities like Johannesburg, cities like Maputo, Dar es Salaam, even small towns like Walvis Bay are absolutely phenomenally committed to this and come up with such good practice that the rest of the world take note of it.
Yeah.
And even big northern cities can actually learn from what's coming out of our continent, as always.
But Kobe, where you sit is actually where perhaps we've seen I don't want to say a lack of planning, but we have seen what nature can do. I mean, we had floods there in Lagos just a few weeks ago, and I think they demonstrate that perhaps the authorities have not properly been able to provide solutions to potential disasters that could come from the work of nature.
Absolutely, and I'm not saying the challenges aren't there.
Sure.
I'm saying the will is there and the innovation is there, and we have good practice around the world where cities can learn from each other and move faster than their national governments can actually do. And it's, yes, and flooding is one example, flash flooding. We, for instance, fairly recently were part of presenting a course to the city of Johannesburg on specifically flash flooding. So we provide technical advice, but we also allow cities to share that sort of information amongst each other. I think where we need to address challenges are on the leadership front, on the governance front, but also very much on the cooperative governance front, when speaking about the different roles of different tiers of government, national government, state government, and then also the local government. So there isn't a one-size-fits-all, of course, and in the world there are many manifestations of these different tiers of government, but we find that in these cross-cutting government solutions, if we have the highest political will also of the nation states to support local governments, we can actually find these solutions. Absolutely. And we see many governors actually and mayors actually showing such leadership that they are engaging at the highest level with their national governments in terms of new ways of cooperating.
Kobe Brand, Regional Director for ICLEI Local Government for Sustainability. Thanks very much indeed for joining us from our Lagos studios.